Welcome back to our next lesson on your first real data type, strings. A string is simply just a series of characters, and anything that is encapsulated inside quotes is considered a string in Python. We can use single quotes or double quotes to identify a string. So, for instance, I can say this is a string inside double quotes. If I use single quotes, I can say this is also a string. However, this is not a string because it's not inside quotes. Note here that when I start with double quotes, I end with double quotes. When I start with single quotes, I end with single quotes. This will give you an error if I start with double quotes and end with single quotes. We have to be consistent in how we define our string. So here, if I type the word hello, I'll say this is a string. But if I type hello without quotations, this does not represent a string, but instead this is a variable. So Python will think that this represents a variable. So we can do a lot of operations here with strings, and we've seen some of them, right? We can pass strings as arguments to the print function. So I can print hello, hello world, right? We'll keep doing that. It's common convention. So if I run this, it prints our message just like we saw in the past. But we can do a lot more with this. In fact, in order to perform a specific operation with a string, or maybe with any specific data type, or perhaps class, we're going to use methods of that class. Now, a method is part of an object. A method allows an object to perform a specific action. So you can kind of think of methods like functions, right? And we already introduced one function, the print function, which performed the action of printing information to the screen. Now, the only difference here is that a function's ubiquitous. It works everywhere. A method, however, belongs specifically to the object. So we're going to use some string methods here today. And in order to do that, there's a special notation. So let's see. Let's start by defining a name variable. So let's say full name. So I'll do full underscore name equals, and I'll do capital J, Johnny, and then space Smith. And I'm purposely writing it out this way, right? And for reasons I'll tell you why. So let's just print full name, right? So if we print our full name, let's see how this looks. Perfect. We get our full name being printed here, just like we would expect. Now we can do a few things here. Instead of printing the full name normally, I can print the full name variable with a string method. So I'm going to call my variable name full name, and then the notation to call a method is a period or dot, and then the method's name. So strings have what's called an upper method. And so I'm going to do dot upper, and I'm going to use two parentheses because, again, methods are a lot like functions. So we need these parentheses because sometimes methods need additional information to work. In this case, we don't need any, so we're going to leave the arguments blank. Now, if you notice, I opened a parenthesis and closed the parenthesis here. I still have an open parenthesis for my print function, so I need one more to close it. If I run this now, when I print my name, because we called the upper method, it capitalizes every letter in the name. So we get Johnny Smith, like we're yelling. We similarly have a lower method, so I'll call full name dot lower. And if I run that, let's just see. It prints everything in lowercase, so it prints the J lower. And then what I normally like to use, we have a title method, full name dot title. So what the title method does is it capitalizes the first letter of each word. And so here we see, right? So maybe a user entered this in as their name, as user input. They forgot to capitalize their letter. We can do some work to make sure that we always standardize the user's input by calling the title method to make sure that the name appears correctly. Let's go a little bit further here. Let's put some spaces at the beginning of Johnny's name. And so now if you run this, see everything is kind of spaced over. Maybe we don't want that. So there is another method that we can call full name dot strip. And what the dot strip method does for strings is it removes any white space that is at the beginning or at the end of the name. And so there you see it, right? That white space was removed. Note here the white space between Johnny and Smith was not removed because the dot strip method only removes white space at the beginning or at the end. And so if you look here, but if I print, full name, none of those changes were permanent, right? So if we run this and I run my module, I still have Johnny Smith here. None of those changes were permanent. So recall that we can always update a variable. So I can say full name is equal to, let's do full name dot title. I'll call the dot title method, and I'll also call the dot strip method. So I can actually call these methods back and forth. So now if I print full name here, my last print function, my name should be nice and cleaned up. And it is, right? That white space is removed and it's nice and capitalized. Very nice.